She gave a homeless child food for 10 years. Then that changes her life forever. Welcome to Tales by Orion. Let's uncover what really happened. Have you ever performed an act of kindness, no matter how small, without any expectation of reward? A simple gesture, a helping hand, a moment of compassion for someone in need. In a world that often rushes past, that prioritizes profit and appearance over people, these small acts can feel like tiny, flickering candles in a vast darkness. But what if one of those candles, tended to with quiet devotion for years, was destined to ignite a firestorm of change? What if a simple daily act of feeding a hungry child could, a decade later, unravel an empire of arrogance and rewrite the future of an entire community? This is a story about that very possibility. It's a testament to the profound, unforeseen power of unwavering kindness and the fallacy of judging worth by worldly standards. It's the story of Anya, a woman whose heart was far bigger than her wallet, and Leo, a boy who the world had thrown away. It's a story of how a decade of humble sandwiches and quiet empathy culminated in a moment of vindication so stunning, so absolute, that it reminds us that the most powerful investments we can ever make are not in stocks or real estate, but in each other. Anya Petrova existed in the quiet, unassuming corners of life, the places most people overlook. She was a woman etched with a gentle sort of sorrow, visible only if you looked closely at the faint lines around her soft, gray eyes, or the way she sometimes stared out the window of the Morning Glory diner, as if seeing a world no one else could. She was the diner's cook and occasional waitress, a fixture as reliable as the sunrise. For 15 years, she had moved with a quiet efficiency in the cramped, perpetually fragrant kitchen, her hands chapped and work-worn, knowing the exact weight of a handful of flour, the precise moment to flip a pancake. Her life was a simple, repeating melody of early mornings, the hiss of the grill, the clatter of plates, and a lonely walk back to her small, second-floor apartment. The diner's old owner, Mr. Henderson, a kind man with flour in his eyebrows and a perpetual smile, had treated her like family. He understood the quiet rhythm of her life, never prying into the past that she kept locked away, a past that held the ghost of a husband and a child she'd lost long ago, a grief that had hollowed her out, but also filled her with a profound, almost painful empathy for the suffering of others. It was this empathy that led her to Leo. He appeared one rain-slicked Tuesday afternoon, a small, shivering bundle of rags huddled in the alleyway behind the diner. He couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, with huge, dark eyes that seemed to absorb all the light and reflect back only a haunted fear. His hair was a matted tangle, his face smudged with dirt, and he flinched when Anya gently pushed the kitchen's back door open. He looked like a frightened fawn, ready to bolt at the slightest sound. Most people would have shooed him away, called the authorities, or simply closed the door and forgotten him. But Anya saw something else. In his small, trembling frame, she saw a flicker of the ghost she carried in her own heart. She saw a vulnerability that resonated with her own deepest pain. Without a word, she went back inside. She took a fresh roll, sliced it, and layered it with thick cuts of roasted turkey and a slice of cheddar cheese. She added an apple and a small carton of milk to a paper bag. She walked back to the door and set the bag on the top step of the stoop, then retreated inside, watching from the cracked window. The boy, Leo, watched her go, his eyes wide with suspicion. He waited a full 5 minutes, motionless, before inching forward. He snatched the bag and scurried back into the deepest shadows of the alley. Anya didn't see him eat it, but when she checked later, the bag was gone. The next day, he was there again, and so was a paper bag. This became their silent ritual, a covenant of kindness established across a threshold, unspoken but deeply understood. Anya never asked for his name, never tried to make him talk. She simply provided. The food was her language, a daily message that said, "I see you. You matter. You are not forgotten." For 3 years, this continued. Leo grew a little taller, a little less skeletal, and the fear in his eyes was slowly, tentatively, being replaced by a flicker of trust. He would sometimes offer a tiny, almost imperceptible nod when she set the bag down. For Anya, this small act was the anchor of her day, a way to channel her unspoken grief into a tangible act of nurturing. It was a secret garden of compassion she tended in the grim alleyway, a place where her own broken heart could still, in some small way, provide sustenance. She didn't know his story, and she didn't need to. All she needed to know was that he was hungry, and she could help. It was a simple equation, the only one that truly made sense in her quiet, lonely world. The quiet melody of Anya's life shattered the day Mr. Henderson announced his retirement. With tears in his kind eyes, he explained that his health was failing and he had sold the Morning Glory Diner. The new owner, he said, was a businessman named Julian Sterling, a man with big ideas. The words were meant to be reassuring, but they sent a chill of apprehension through Anya. Julian Sterling arrived a week later, not in a flour-dusted apron, but in a razor-sharp Italian suit, his shoes gleaming, his hair perfectly coiffed. He smelled of expensive cologne and ambition. He strode into the diner as if he were conquering a new territory, his cold, assessing gaze sweeping over the worn linoleum floors, the cracked vinyl booths, and the faded photographs on the wall with undisguised disdain. He represented everything the Morning Glory was not: slick, impersonal, and obsessed with image. His first staff meeting was less of an introduction and more of a declaration of war on the diner's past. "This establishment," he began, his voice crisp and condescending, "is an underperforming asset. The charm you all seem to cherish is, in fact, just another word for shabby. We will be undergoing a complete rebranding. The Morning Glory will become Sterling's, a high-end bistro catering to a more discerning clientele." He looked pointedly at the simple, hearty fare on the menu boards. "The menu will be revamped. Prices will be increased. And our standards for staff and presentation will be elevated immediately." His gaze fell upon Anya. She stood quietly at the back, her hands tucked into the pockets of her clean but faded apron. He sized her up in an instant. The plain, middle-aged woman, the embodiment of the old-fashioned, unprofitable world he was here to demolish. A faint, dismissive sneer touched his lips. The core conflict, the inciting incident of Anya's quiet tragedy, ignited a few days later. It was mid-afternoon, and as she had done for years, Anya prepared the small paper bag for Leo. He was a lanky 11-year-old now, still wary, but their ritual was the one constant in his life. As she pushed open the back door to place the bag on the stoop, a sharp voice cut through the air. "What do you think you're doing?" It was Sterling. He had been lurking, observing. He strode over, his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel of the alley. He looked from Anya's face to the bag in her hand, and then to the shadows where Leo was hidden, though Leo had already vanished like smoke. Sterling's expression curdled with disgust. "Are you feeding strays from my kitchen? With my inventory? He's just a hungry boy, Mr. Sterling," Anya said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "He doesn't bother anyone." Sterling snatched the bag from her hand and peered inside. "Turkey, cheddar, this is premium product. This isn't charity food. This is theft." The accusation, so cold and cruel, struck Anya like a physical blow. "Mr. Henderson always allowed it," she stammered, defending not just herself but the memory of the diner's soul. "I am not Mr. Henderson," Sterling hissed, his voice low and venomous. "Mr. Henderson ran a charity, which is why he died poor. I run a business. We have a new policy, effective immediately. Zero spoilage, zero waste, and absolutely no handouts. Every slice of bread, every ounce of meat is accounted for. Giving away inventory is grounds for immediate termination. Do you understand me?" He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and contemptuously dropped the entire bag into the large, foul-smelling dumpster. He then fixed her with a final, chilling glare. "And I don't want vermin, human or otherwise, loitering around my property. Get rid of him." The door slammed shut, leaving Anya standing alone in the alley, the echo of his cruelty hanging in the air. The covenant had been broken. The one small act of kindness that gave her life meaning had just been branded a crime. In that moment, Anya knew her quiet life was over. A war had been declared on her compassion, and she, a humble diner cook, was on one side, with the cold, ruthless ambition of Julian Sterling on the other. The years that followed became a long, grueling test of Anya's resilience and resolve. Julian Sterling's rebranding of the Morning Glory Diner was swift and brutal. The warm, welcoming name was replaced by a sterile, metallic sign that simply read Sterling's. The cozy booths were ripped out and replaced with cold, minimalist tables and chairs that were uncomfortable by design, encouraging quick turnover. The menu was filled with overpriced, pretentiously named dishes that required ingredients Anya had to learn to pronounce, let alone cook. But the most significant change was the atmosphere. The diner, once a place of community and warmth, became a tense, high-pressure environment ruled by fear. Sterling was a tyrant who prowled the kitchen and dining room, quick to berate staff for the smallest infraction in front of customers. He fostered a culture of backstabbing and sycophancy among the staff. Two of the younger waitresses, Tiffany and Brooke, quickly became Sterling's favorites, a mocking chorus who echoed his disdain for the old ways and, by extension, for Anya. They would sneer at her plain clothes, mock her quiet demeanor, and report her every move to Sterling, hoping to curry favor. "Did you see Anya burn the foam on that cappuccino?" Tiffany would whisper loudly to Brooke. "She just doesn't have the finesse for this kind of place." The zero-waste policy was enforced with an iron fist, aimed squarely at Anya. Sterling would personally inspect the trash at the end of each night. He installed cameras in the kitchen, not for security, but to monitor her. He was determined to break her, to force her to quit so he could replace her with a younger, trendier chef. But Anya endured. Quitting was not an option. The job, however miserable it had become, was her only source of income. More importantly, she refused to abandon Leo. The alleyway behind the diner was no longer safe, but Anya's commitment did not waver. It simply went underground. She began buying groceries with her own meager savings, making sandwiches at home in her small apartment kitchen before her shift. She would find new, discreet places to leave the food for Leo, tucked inside a loose brick in a nearby wall, on a bench in the park she knew he frequented, or sometimes, when she saw him from a distance, she would catch his eye and give a subtle nod towards a hidden spot. Their silent communication evolved, becoming a clandestine operation of kindness. This personal sacrifice was immense. Her wages were barely enough to cover her own rent and bills. Buying extra food meant she often went without dinner herself, her own meals reduced to leftover bread crusts and weak tea. She grew thinner, the lines of worry on her face deepening, but her resolve only hardened. Leo was growing too. He was a teenager now, tall and lanky, his face losing its boyish roundness. The hunger he carried was no longer just for food, but for a place in the world. Anya's daily meal was more than sustenance. It was the only proof he had that someone, somewhere, cared if he lived or died. He never spoke to her, the habit of silence and caution ingrained too deeply, but the gratitude in his eyes when he would catch a glimpse of her was profound. On one particularly cold winter evening, Anya saw that his jacket was threadbare, full of holes. The sight tore at her heart. That week, she skipped paying her electricity bill, using the money instead to buy a warm, second-hand winter coat and a pair of sturdy boots from a thrift store. She left them in a large bag in one of their usual spots, with a sandwich and a thermos of hot soup. The next day, she saw him wearing the coat, his hands tucked into the deep pockets. He saw her watching from the diner window, and for the first time in all the years, he gave her a small, hesitant smile. It was a beacon of light in her increasingly bleak existence. Her co-workers, Tiffany and Brooke, noticed her financial struggles and delighted in her hardship. "I heard her landlord was asking about late rent," Brooke would snicker, probably spending all her money on stray cats. Sterling, too, seemed to take a sadistic pleasure in her decline. He cut her hours, piled on the most menial tasks, and continued his campaign of public humiliation. "Anya," he'd bark across the bustling kitchen, "the floor is filthy. Mop it. If you can't handle the heat of a real kitchen, perhaps janitorial work is more your speed." He was trying to crush her spirit, to grind her down until nothing was left. But he failed to understand the source of her strength. It wasn't pride or ambition. It was a fierce, protective love for a boy the world had discarded. Every hardship she endured, every dollar she sacrificed, was an act of defiance against the cold cruelty of men like Sterling. She was a quiet, lonely soldier in a war no one else could see, and she could not surrender. 10 years is a long time. It's long enough for a boy to become a man, for a quiet diner to become a soulless bistro, and for the slow burn of injustice to build into a pressure that must inevitably find release. For Anya Petrova, it had been a decade of quiet endurance, a relentless battle fought with sandwiches and secondhand coats. For Julian Sterling, it had been a decade of aggressive expansion. Fueled by a mountain of debt and an insatiable ego, he had leveraged the modest success of his flagship bistro to build a small empire of Sterling-branded restaurants, coffee shops, and hotels. On the surface, he was the picture of success, his name featured in lifestyle magazines, his face a fixture at high society events. But beneath the polished veneer, his empire was a house of cards, teetering on the brink of collapse. A series of risky investments had failed, and his creditors were circling like sharks. He was desperate. His last hope was to secure a massive capital infusion from a new, mysterious, and incredibly powerful private equity firm that had recently burst onto the scene, Apex Cidian Global. Apex Cidian was a ghost in the financial world, known for its ruthless efficiency, its staggering wealth, and its enigmatic, press-shy CEO, a young prodigy known only by his first name, Leo. Securing a meeting with Apex Cidian was nearly impossible, but Sterling, calling in every favor he had, managed to land one. He decided to host the make-or-break meeting at his original bistro, the place where it all started, to project an image of grounded, long-term success. The day of the meeting, the atmosphere at Sterling's was electric with tension. Sterling was a nervous wreck, his usual arrogance replaced by a sweaty-palmed anxiety. He barked orders at everyone, demanding perfection. "The silverware must be polished until I can see my reflection," he snapped at Brooke. "Tiffany, your smile looks forced. Be charming, not terrifying." He turned his ire on Anya, who was stoically working the lunch rush in the kitchen. "Anya, you'll be on your absolute best behavior today. No mistakes. No long faces. You are to be practically invisible unless spoken to. The future of this entire company rests on this meeting." Anya simply nodded, her expression unreadable. She had seen this man at his worst for 10 years. His panic was nothing new. She felt a strange sense of detachment, as if she were watching a play unfold. Her only thought was that she had managed to leave a package for the now young man, Leo, earlier that morning, a hearty meal tucked into a hollowed-out book she'd left for him at the public library where he spent his days reading and studying. He was 18 now, and she knew he was trying to get his GED. Her support was more critical than ever. The catalytic event was set. The stage was Sterling's own creation, a temple built to his ego. The players were in place. The desperate, arrogant gatekeeper, the mocking, complicit chorus of staff, and the quiet, underestimated cook. The only piece missing was the catalyst himself, the mysterious figure who held the fate of Sterling's world in his hands. The moment of truth was approaching, not just for Julian Sterling's financial future, but for a decade of silent sacrifice and unseen kindness. The universe, it seemed, was about to balance its books, and the currency it used was justice. The quiet observation phase was over. A crisis, manufactured by Sterling's own greed, had provided the perfect platform for a revelation that would be more powerful and more shocking than anyone in that room could possibly imagine. The sleek, black limousine pulled up outside Sterling's precisely at 2 o'clock. The hush inside the bistro was so absolute that the soft click of the car door opening sounded like a gunshot. Julian Sterling, his face pale and his smile stretched into a painful-looking rictus, rushed to the entrance, flanked by Tiffany and Brooke, who were poised with pitchers of iced water. The door opened and a man stepped out, followed by a small entourage of sharp-suited lawyers, both male and female. But all eyes were on the leader. He was a young man, perhaps in his early 20s, with an air of command that was startling for his age. He was tall and lean, dressed in a bespoke charcoal gray suit that fit him like a second skin. He had dark, intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything and a calm, confident expression that gave nothing away. This was Leo, the enigmatic head of Apex City and Global. Sterling practically bowed, extending a trembling hand. "Mr. Leo, an absolute honor to welcome you to my establishment. I am Julian Sterling. Please come in, come in." Leo shook his hand with a firm, cool grip, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice a low, steady baritone that held an unexpected depth. He and his team were led to the best table in the restaurant, which Sterling had cordially sequestered. The presentation began. Sterling, now in performance mode, launched into a slick, well-rehearsed speech about growth potential, market synergy, and brand value. He presented charts and graphs, his voice regaining some of its old, boastful cadence as he tried to sell his vision, his desperation thinly veiled by a veneer of confidence. Anya, from her station in the kitchen, could hear the drone of his voice. She was plating a late lunch order for one of the few other tables, her movements as methodical and precise as ever. She was meant to be invisible, and she was doing her best to comply, focusing only on her work. Leo and his team listened impassively, occasionally asking sharp, pointed questions that seemed to fluster Sterling. The atmosphere was tense. After about 20 minutes, Leo held up a hand, cutting Sterling off mid-sentence. "Mr. Sterling," he said calmly, "your numbers are optimistic. Let's pause for a moment." His gaze, which had been fixed on the presentation, began to drift around the room, taking in the decor, the staff, the very air of the place. It was the look of a man not just evaluating a business, but taking the measure of its soul. And then his eyes fell on the pass-through window to the kitchen. He saw a woman with tired, kind eyes and work-worn hands placing a plate of food on the shelf. Her hair was streaked with gray, and her shoulders had the slight slump of someone who carried a heavy, unseen burden. He saw Anya. The world seemed to slow down. The hum of the bistro, Sterling's sycophantic chatter, the rustling of papers, it all faded into a dull roar. Leo's calm, professional mask dissolved, replaced by a look of profound, heart-stopping recognition. He stood up abruptly. The sudden movement startled everyone at the table. His lawyers looked at him, confused. Sterling's face fell, certain he had already blown the deal. "Mr. Leo, is everything all right?" Sterling asked, his voice cracking. Leo didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Anya, who had looked up, startled by the sudden silence. Their eyes met across the room. For a split second, Anya was confused. She saw a handsome, powerful young man in an expensive suit staring at her. Then she looked closer into his dark eyes and saw a flicker of something she knew. She saw the haunted little boy in the alley, the lanky teenager with the hesitant smile. The world tilted on its axis. Leo took a step, then another, walking away from the high-stakes meeting, away from his team, directly towards the kitchen pass-through. He stopped right in front of her, the polished counter the only thing separating them. The entire restaurant was now watching in baffled silence. "Anya," he said, his voice soft now, vulnerable, stripped of all its corporate authority. "It's me." He paused, his throat working. "It's Leo." The name, spoken with such raw emotion in the dead-silent restaurant, hung in the air like a physical object. Now, for Anya, it was as if a key had turned in a lock deep inside her, opening a door to a flood of memories. A small, shivering boy, a decade of paper bags left on a stoop, a hesitant smile in a second-hand coat. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes welling with tears of pure, unadulterated shock. The plate she was holding slipped from her other hand and clattered onto the pass-through shelf, but no one noticed. "Leo?" she whispered, her voice choked with disbelief. It couldn't be. The powerful, impeccably dressed man standing before her couldn't possibly be the forgotten, hungry child from the alley. But the eyes, the dark, intelligent eyes, were the same. The vulnerability that had momentarily replaced his commanding presence was achingly familiar. Julian Sterling, seeing his multi-million-dollar deal walking away to speak to his lowly cook, was apoplectic. He rushed over, his face a mask of fury and confusion. "Mr. Leo, I apologize for my staff's interruption. Anya, get back to work. What is the meaning of this?" Leo didn't even look at Sterling. His entire world was focused on the woman in the faded apron. "It's all right, Anya," he said, his voice regaining its steady calm, though it was now laced with a warmth that hadn't been there before. He then turned his head slightly, addressing Sterling without looking at him, his tone dropping several degrees in temperature. "Mr. Sterling, please be quiet. You are interrupting a reunion 10 years in the making." Sterling froze, utterly bewildered. The mocking chorus, Tiffany and Brooke, who had been watching from the service station, exchanged looks of complete bafflement. What could this powerful billionaire possibly have to do with their invisible cook? Leo turned his full attention back to Anya. "I never had the chance to thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For 10 years. Every single day. You fed me. You clothed me. You were the only person in the entire world who saw me. You saved my life, Anya. In every way a person can be saved." He then looked past her, at the tense, hostile environment of the kitchen, at the demeaning tasks piled up, and a new expression crossed his face. A cold, hard anger. He straightened to his full height, the powerful CEO returning with a vengeance. He turned to face the entire room, his voice now ringing with an authority that was absolute and chilling. "For those of you who are confused," he began, his gaze sweeping over Sterling, Tiffany, and Brooke, "let me clarify. My name is Leo, and for the first 18 years of my life, I was homeless. I grew up on the streets of this city, sleeping in alleys, including the one right behind this building." A collective gasp went through the room. Sterling's face went from confused to utterly ashen as the horrifying implications began to dawn on him. "This woman," Leo continued, gesturing to Anya with a look of profound reverence. "This woman you all treat like a piece of furniture is the single reason I am alive and standing here today. When I had nothing, she gave me everything she could, from her own pocket, from her own table, while your boss, Mr. Sterling," and here he fixed Sterling with a look of pure ice, "was throwing the food she tried to give me into the dumpster and threatening to fire her for it." The revelation hit the room like a physical shockwave. Tiffany and Brooke blanched, their past mockery and cruelty flashing before their eyes. Other staff members looked down in shame. Sterling looked as if he was about to have a heart attack. He opened his mouth, but only a strangled croak came out. "Now," Leo said, his voice dangerously soft, "let's get back to our meeting, shall we, Mr. Sterling? Because I believe I have everything I need to make my final decision about your company's future." The climax had arrived. Not with a bang, but with a quiet, devastating truth revealed on a stage of pure poetic justice. The hidden master's identity was out, but it wasn't Anya's. It was the identity of the boy she had saved, and his vindication was about to become her own. Leo walked back to the table, his composure absolute, leaving a trail of shock and horror in his wake. Anya stood frozen by the pass-through, her mind reeling, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Julian Sterling, on legs that felt like jelly, stumbled back to his chair. The slick presentation, the charts, the confident projections, it had all turned to ash. He was no longer a CEO pitching a deal. He was a defendant awaiting his sentence. Leo sat down and calmly folded his hands on the table. He looked directly at Sterling, his eyes devoid of any warmth. "Mr. Sterling," he began, his voice a model of cold, corporate precision. "Apex City and Global's decision-making process is based on a rigorous, multifaceted analysis. We assess financial viability, market position, and growth potential. But we also have another, equally important metric, leadership integrity. We do not invest in rot." The word rot hung in the air, a final, damning indictment. "Your company is leveraged to the hilt. Your business model is unsustainable, built on flash and no substance. And your leadership, Leo let the word hang for a moment, letting Sterling squirm. Your leadership is morally bankrupt. You build your empire by exploiting people, by fostering a culture of fear and cruelty, by literally taking food from the mouth of a hungry child. A man who would do that for the price of a turkey sandwich cannot be trusted with a $10 investment, let alone the $500 million you're asking for. Sterling, his face slick with sweat, began to babble. It was a misunderstanding, a business policy. I didn't know. Please, Mr. Leo, my company, my life's work. Your life's work. Leo cut him off, his voice sharp as glass. Your life's work has been to terrorize a good woman who showed more character in a single act of kindness than you have displayed in your entire life. So no, Mr. Sterling, we will not be investing in your company. In fact, my legal team has already been in contact with your primary creditors this morning. Given your misrepresentation of key assets and your precarious financial position, which my analysts uncovered last night, the banks have agreed to call on your loans. Effective immediately. The finality of the statement was absolute. Sterling wasn't just being denied a lifeline. His entire ship was being scuttled. He stared at Leo, his mouth agape, a look of utter ruin on his face. The mocking chorus was next. Leo's gaze shifted to Tiffany and Brooke, who were trying to make themselves invisible behind the service counter. And as for the staff, he said, his voice carrying across the room, integrity is a quality that should be valued at all levels. Those who have enabled and participated in this toxic culture will find that their professional reputations are about to become as bankrupt as their boss. The two women flinched as if struck. The immediate aftermath was a scene of beautiful, karmic collapse. One of Leo's lawyers, a stern-faced woman, quietly began making calls, setting the legal destruction of Sterling's empire into motion. Sterling himself seemed to have aged 20 years in 20 minutes, slumping in his chair, a broken man. Leo stood up and walked back over to Anya. He gently took her work-worn hands in his own. Anya, he said softly, I'm so sorry you had to endure that for so long. I don't understand, she whispered, still trying to process the impossible reality. Ow! You gave me more than food, Anya, he explained, his voice full of gratitude. You gave me a reason to believe that good existed in the world. That gave me the strength to survive. I taught myself to read at the library. A teacher there saw something in me, became a mentor, helped me get my GED, then a scholarship. I had a mind for numbers, for systems. I worked harder than anyone because I was terrified of going back to that alley. Everything I built it on the foundation you gave me. I never forgot. He then smiled, a genuine, warm smile that finally, truly, reached his eyes. And now, I'm in a position to pay you back. The onlookers, the other staff, the few remaining patrons, watched in awed silence. They were witnessing more than just a business deal gone south. They were witnessing a profound act of justice, a decade in the making, delivered with surgical precision. The underdog had not just triumphed. She had been vindicated by the very person she had saved, who had returned as a king to vanquish her dragon. The full scope of Leo's plan became apparent in the hours and days that followed. His rejection of Sterling's proposal and the subsequent calling in of loans was just the first step. The news of Sterling's dramatic, public ruin spread through the city's business community like wildfire. His other restaurants and properties, all part of the same over-leveraged corporate structure, fell like dominoes. The Sterling brand, once a symbol of chic exclusivity, became synonymous with toxic leadership and spectacular failure. But Leo wasn't just interested in destruction. He was interested in reconstruction. The day after the fateful meeting, as the bistro sat closed with the under new management sign hastily taped to the door, Leo met Anya there. He brought coffee and pastries from a small, family-owned bakery, a deliberate contrast to the pretentious fare Sterling had served. He sat with her at one of the cold, minimalist tables, the place feeling like a tomb of a fallen tyrant. I'm having all of this torn out, Leo said, gesturing around the room. I want to put the warmth back in. We'll bring back the comfortable booths, the old pictures on the wall. We'll make it a place where people feel welcome again." Anya looked at him, still overwhelmed. Leo smiled. "Anya, my lawyers finalized the purchase of this building this morning, along with the assets of Sterling's now-defunct company. It's all mine, which means it's all yours." He slid a thick folder across the table. Anya opened it tentatively. Inside were legal documents, deeds, and a contract. "I want you to run this place, Anya," he explained gently. "Not just as a manager, as the president of the new hospitality group we're forming. You'll have full autonomy, a budget that means you'll never have to worry about the cost of cheese again, and a salary that reflects your new position." Anya stared at the number on the contract, her eyes widening in disbelief. It was more money than she had earned in her entire life, multiplied several times over. "And your first official act," Leo continued, "can be to fire anyone who doesn't align with our new company's core value, compassion." The fates of the antagonists were sealed. Sterling, facing personal bankruptcy and lawsuits from other investors, disappeared from public life, a disgraced and broken man. Tiffany and Brooke were the first to be let go, their termination letters personally signed by Anya. It wasn't an act of revenge, but one of necessity. The new diner had no place for their brand of casual cruelty. They left humbled, forced to confront the consequences of aligning themselves with the wrong side of history. Some of the other staff, those who had been quiet but complicit, were given a chance to stay on under probation, to learn the new way of doing things. The systemic change had begun. Anya, initially hesitant to step into such a powerful role, found her footing with surprising speed. The same quiet strength and integrity that had allowed her to endure years of hardship now made her an exceptional leader. Her first major policy change was the implementation of a pay-it-forward board, where customers could prepay for meals for those in need. She established a partnership with a local shelter, providing daily hot meals and offering employment opportunities to residents trying to get back on their feet. The diner was reborn. Heeding Leo's wish, she renamed it, not back to the morning glory, but simply to Anya's Place. It became a beacon in the community, a place known not for its fancy decor or high prices, but for its good food and even better heart. The story of what happened, the homeless boy who became a billionaire and the kind cook who saved him, became a local legend, a moral tale whispered over coffee and pie. Anya herself remained largely unchanged. Despite her new wealth and status, she still wore simple clothes, still treated everyone with the same quiet respect, and could still occasionally be found in the kitchen, her hands dusted with flour, simply because she loved to cook. Her victory was not just personal, it was a triumph of her values. She had reformed the flawed environment not by adopting its tactics, but by replacing them entirely with her own unwavering principles of kindness and compassion. To fully appreciate the magnificent arc of this story, one must understand the crucible that forged Leo. His journey from a terrified child in an alley to the formidable CEO of Apex City and Global was not a fairy tale. It was a testament to a ferocious will to survive, a brilliant mind, and the enduring power of a single, consistent source of kindness. After aging out of the system with no family and no resources, the world had written him off. His days were a blur of hunger, cold, and the constant, gnawing fear of invisibility. Anya's daily meal was his only anchor. It was a tangible proof that he existed, that his life had some small value to at least one person. This, more than the calories, was the fuel that kept him from succumbing to despair. The food gave him the physical energy to walk to the public library, which became his sanctuary. He taught himself to read using children's books, then devoured every book he could get his hands on: history, science, economics, philosophy. His mind, sharp and starved for input, absorbed information at a prodigious rate. He discovered a natural aptitude for mathematics and systems, seeing patterns in the world that others missed. It was in the quiet stacks of a library that a high school teacher and volunteer tutor, a man named Mr. Davies, noticed him. He saw the fierce intelligence in the quiet teenager's eyes and the stacks of advanced textbooks on his table. Mr. Davies became his mentor, the second pillar of his salvation. He helped Leo study for his GED, which he passed with the highest score the testing center had ever seen. Recognizing his extraordinary potential, Mr. Davies leveraged every connection he had, fighting for this brilliant, forgotten boy, and eventually secured him a full academic scholarship to the state university. College was another world. For the first time, Leo had a room, a bed, and a meal plan. But he lived like a monk, driven by a relentless fire. He took on a punishing course load, focusing on finance and computer science. He saw the global economy as a massive, complex system, and he was determined to master it. His motivation was twofold. First was the burning desire to never be cold or hungry again. Second, and more profoundly, was the memory of Anya. He carried the image of her kind, tired face in his mind. He was determined to become someone worthy of her faith in him, to build a life so successful that he could one day return and repay her tenfold. He started a small investment club in college, using complex algorithms he developed to predict market fluctuations. His success was small at first, but consistent. Upon graduating, he turned down lucrative offers from Wall Street, choosing instead to start his own firm with a handful of other brilliant, hungry outsiders. He named it Apex City and Global, a name that spoke of reaching the pinnacle from an unseen place. His strategies were audacious, his analysis flawless, and his work ethic legendary. In a few short years, his firm grew exponentially, its success becoming the stuff of financial legend. Throughout his meteoric rise, he never forgot his origins. He used a private investigator to discreetly keep tabs on Anya. He read the reports with a heavy heart, learning of her struggles under the tyrannical Mr. Sterling. The knowledge of her quiet suffering fueled his ambition, hardening his resolve. He wasn't just building a company. He was forging a weapon, a tool of justice. When he learned that Sterling's empire was on the verge of collapse and that he was desperately seeking an investor, Leo knew his moment had come. He orchestrated the meeting, setting the stage with the precision of a grandmaster in chess. His return to the diner was not a coincidence. It was a calculated, deliberate act. He wanted the vindication to happen on the very ground where Anya had been humiliated in front of the very people who had scorned her. He wanted her redemption to be as public and undeniable as her suffering had been private and prolonged. His success, therefore, was not a lucky break. It was the earned, inevitable outcome of a promise he had made to himself long ago, a promise to honor the woman who had shown him that a single act of kindness could be the most powerful force in the universe. In the end, this story, which began in the shadows of a lonely alley, concludes in the warm, bright light of a place reborn. Anya's place became more than a diner. It became a living monument to the idea that a business could be successful not in spite of its compassion, but because of it. Anya Petrova, the woman who was once considered an invisible, slightly pathetic fixture, was now one of the most respected figures in her community. Yet, she remained grounded, her spirit untouched by wealth or status. Her greatest joy was not in the soaring profits, but in seeing a person down on their luck enjoy a hot meal, no questions asked, or in handing a new apron to someone from the local shelter, offering them their first job in years. She had achieved a victory that was not just personal, but systemic. She had replaced a culture of cruelty with one of kindness, and proved it could be a sustainable, even profitable, model. Leo, having settled his oldest and most important debt, continued to lead Apex City and Global with the same brilliance and a newfound, publicly acknowledged sense of purpose. He established the Apex City and Foundation, a massive charitable organization dedicated to combating youth homelessness, with Anya serving as an honorary board member. He used his immense power not just to generate wealth, but to create ladders for others, ensuring that forgotten children like him would have a chance to climb. He and Anya remained deeply connected, their bond forged in hardship and cemented in triumph. They were not just a success story. They were family, a testament to the fact that family is not always about blood, but about who shows up for you when you have nothing. The thematic message of their journey is both simple and profound. It is a powerful rebuke to a world that often judges people by the superficial metrics of wealth, status, and appearance. Julian Sterling and his cronies saw Anya as a worthless, sentimental old woman and Leo as human refuse. Their lack of vision, their inability to see the potential for greatness in a hungry child or the profound strength in a quiet woman's heart, was their ultimate undoing. Their story serves as a piece of poetic justice, a karmic retribution so fitting it feels like a moral tale from a classic book. It highlights the incredible, often unseen, ripple effect of our actions. Anya's daily act of kindness, repeated over years, was a small, consistent pressure that ultimately fractured a corrupt system and unlocked a torrent of human potential in Leo. It begs us all to consider the power we hold in our own hands. A kind word, a simple meal, a moment of empathy, these are not small things. They are seeds. We may never know which of these seeds will fall on fertile ground and grow into a mighty tree capable of providing shade and shelter for many. So, the next time you see someone who the world seems to have forgotten, the next time you're tempted to judge a person by their worn-out clothes or their quiet demeanor, remember Anya. Remember Leo. And remember that the most valuable currency we possess is not in our bank accounts, but in our capacity for compassion. For it is this currency that truly has the power to change the world, one quiet, unassuming act of kindness at a time.